I don't know if Ron Easter's here, but I don't know, Ron had a big chair upstairs in the Department of Aviation, and he kept a record of all us bush boys. And if he's here today, I hope someone will lend him some earplugs, because he won't know anything about this story, I hope.
He's upstairs, probably. Right up, I think. Didn't he pass away, right?
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Yes, he used to come to our meetings. Decided to renew the Esperance post office and pull down a magnificent old building made of stone. And at that time, a chap called Ray Worthington was down there looking after all the telephones. I think he was the whole telephone department of the PMG. And Ray came to me and said that one of the engineers from the in Perth, from the head office of the telephone department, whatever it was called in those days, had bought a yacht in Sydney, and a friend of mine, Bill Skevington, had gone over to make sure the boat was all trim and taut, and he was to sail it from Sydney to Western Australia via Esperance, but he'd broken down in South Australia, and he was sailing it around, and round about this area he found problems with the rigging. Something broke and he couldn't actually sail it, and he drifted up into the bay here, and he didn't seem to have a lot of control somehow, and as I'm not quite sure of these facts, but I think the only sex he had on board was a sextant. And he gave us, if the radio would only work at night, it was an HF radio, and he gave us exact details of where he was each day for more than a week, drifting in a curve around the bay. And on the 12th of January 1972, we got this message, I need help, and straight away. We worked out that the nearest point, he should have been in this area here, and it was a long way from Israelite Bay, and any of the land here was closest to that point. Oh, and all we had was a Cherokee 140, and we sat up all night in the post office, well, not all night, until midnight, making parachutes. We went to the battery people and we got acid containers. Oh, and the reason, I'm not following the notes well enough, the reason was that he'd broken the rigging, but he decided because it was a new yacht, he ought to change the oil. So he drained all the oil out into the bilge, put the new oil in and left the filter loose and pumped all the new oil out. So he didn't have any oil and he didn't have any sails. Well, he had some sails, you'll see in the picture, but I don't know why, he didn't seem to be able to control the boat. It just was drifting. So it was a pandemonium. So we could, from the battery people, we got those containers. Remember, they used to bring the acid down and pour it into the batteries, and then they had all these plastic containers. We could put a gallon of oil in each one. We decided that we could drop them with parachutes. I hadn't experienced another search before. So we used binder twine, or string from hay, anyone that doesn't know farmers here. And we had plastic sheets to make the parachute, and then we wrapped that around the container of oil and loaded them into the car late at night. Unwise to be late working at night when you're doing difficult flying in the day. And there was a bit of a joke that he must have been a whiskey drinker. And because they were building the post office and we were upstairs with all the junk around, we found insulation and we wrapped the bottle of whiskey up in insulation and put a parachute on it, the same as all the containers of oil. Now, I of course thought about this very deeply, that it might have been, I'd have to be very careful going right out to sea with a single engine with the door off. We decided we'd have to take the door off. Now, but this Esperance is there, and the NDB's out there. These are the the distances. We were doing fish spotting at another time along this deep channel, and when you were at 1,500 feet, you ran out of navigation aids there. Israelite Bay's up here, and there used to be one at Kaiguna, but the wise people in the east, where there's millions of nav aids and things all overlapping, decided that we didn't need one up at Kaiguna, and left us with absolutely no nav aids there at all, and of course we hadn't heard of GPS. So we decided what we'd do is because it didn't fly too well with the door off and the noise was terrible, we decided to fly out to Israelite Bay, land on the lake, take the door off there. That's 110 nautical miles, and then this was 70 nautical miles around the water to Point Culver. So we went to Israelite Bay, and I walked around the aircraft before I went and thought, how are we going to do this? If we chuck a gallon of oil out and it hits the tail and we're out over the water, it's not very satisfactory. And then we decided we'd have to push it over the front of the wing. If you look at Piper, he was sitting near enough to go over the wing. I worked out, this is the old map I used, that we worked out he should have been there, that's Point Culver, that if I flew 9 minutes south and then I did 3 minutes east and then go up a minute, I'd work a square and I was bound to find him at 1,500. So we flew the 9 minutes south, we did 1.5 minutes east, and we were right over the top of him. That's where we landed at Israelite Bay, on that little bit there. This is the old jetty where they used to load wool from Israelite Bay. And that's what we found, that's the boat. And but the joke was, and the biggest fright in my life, I still feel a bit strange, I'd said, well, I'll go down, I'll reduce the speed and just glide down just above the siren going and stalling speed, and got above the mast and gave him a nudge because he couldn't talk too well with the noise, and he leaned out over the wing to push the parachute over, and you have to roll it so that the wing gets in the parachute. If you push it over straight away, the wing will hold the parachute back on it and it won't open up. Anyhow, when he landed out, I forgot that would tell the thing, stop, it would make the aircraft stall. So I was just above the mast, had the throttle on and the nose down just above the water, and it was a hell of a fright. I still feel a bit goose fleshy when I think of it. So we got up high, and then our pattern of dropping the stuff was a bit too wide. That's the rowboat there. And then we dropped one there, and the poor fella would have to row over there. And you can see a patch there where if one of the parachutes or two of the parachutes didn't open and the container hit the sea and burst open, it's well on the water. So when it got to the end, I said, we were signalling, hardly talking, and I said, what about the whiskey? And he put it out apparently, and he had a terribly frightened look on his face, and I looked back, and there's the bottle of whiskey going like this near the tailplane, and it was stuck and hanging on. And before we went, I looked around for any problems, and I saw the drain cock sticking down under the right-hand wing, and I thought, well, that's a bit of a risk. So we decided and used the right-hand fuel tank all the way out, and left the left tank full because it was a 380 nautical mile round trip. And one of the biggest crises of the whole show was me landing on the lake on a short field and not breaking a bottle of whiskey. That's the bottle of whiskey there with the insulation, and that's the parachute hanging on the drain cock. And we put the door on and lived happily ever after.